Martin, good to see you. Last week of May, and we were talking offline, and I thought it was important to grab what you were starting to talk about your article to record it to get this on here. So I'm going to turn over to you and describe for me this article that you're working on and what it's about.
Well, I was just up in Alberta, and about 40% of the people up there at this stage are want to leave Canada. And I mean, some want to be the 51st state, others maybe an independent country, and then a third group are like remaining sovereign within Canada, like Quebec or something. But it's I mean, that's what I was dealing with up there, and they want me, to talk to the premier and stuff. So I put together the research on this, and it's on our site now. It's what percent of the question was really what percentage of the population does it take to make a revolution or separate or something of that nature? And I went through every revolution, separation, from ancient times on. And I was shocked, actually. On average, it's less than 15%. And when I think about it as a trader, that also applies. Why do markets crash? Because the vast majority must always be wrong. They're all long. They all, they've just bought, Bitcoin or gold or the stock market, whatever, and they're expecting it to continue going up forever. And the problem becomes that some start to take profit or some news happens or whatever. They try to sell. And you pick up the phone, you call the broker, and what do you get? No bid. Because they are the market. This is how things crash. And I mean, even during the Great Depression, they had Senate hearings and they called in everybody, all the rich players, and they found they were all long. Nobody was short. And this is what it is. It's a small minority of people that actually make a separation or a revolution. And, it's counter trend to what you would think. But I did all the research, pulled up everything on everyone, and it was quite interesting. And like even the American Revolution, I mean, the vast majority were not, not into it. Georgia even issued finally paper currency backed by assets confiscated from Tories, people that supported the king. And so you go through this. I mean, you take when the Jews rebelled against Rome, the zealots were less than 10,000 people, but they start all the action. They were guerrilla warfare, things of this nature. And so next thing you know, it engulfs the whole country. It's very fascinating, and these things become a contagion. I remember when Tiananmen Square happened and then the Berlin Wall fell, I think about 26 weeks later or something. And people were saying, oh, it's the communications. No, it's not. All right. Rome overthrew its king in 509 BC. And within 6 months, Athens overthrows its tyrants and democracy was born. These things are always a contagion. You look at the revolution of 1848. It started basically in Sicily. Then it becomes a contagion and spread throughout all of Europe. overthrew the king in France. Um, these things just become, oh, that's a good idea. We should do it too. Um, so once you get one going, you see it. Now, for example, like Trump was elected. And again, what do you see is a contagion. Suddenly in Germany, AFD, which was, oh, they're a bunch of Nazis, whatever, number one party now. In Britain, Nigel Farage, his Reform Party, number one now. So you're seeing, even in Europe, you're seeing this changing and shifting to the right. So these things become contagions, just like a flu or something else. It's an idea that spreads, and that's how even technology takes place. All of a sudden, everybody's involved. The hot market in .com, for 2000. Then it becomes Bitcoin and AI stocks. They're the number one thing. We tend to herd together as a human species or something, but it takes place in markets as well as politics.
The the Bitcoin space, to me, I've had a few, I would call them Bitcoin enthusiasts on over the last couple of weeks, and I mean, some are no gold, Bitcoin only, and I don't know what to make of it. I have people on, they share their views, and I still can't grasp it. I don't know. I mean, you and I've talked about it.
Bitcoin is a trading vehicle like anything else. That's all. This nonsense, replace the dollar. First of all, it's mainly because people misinterpret inflation and everything else. We have to prevent central banks from creating money. Central banks don't create all the money. It's basically debt that's being used to, just pays interest. But you have to understand that the money supply must increase. If it does not increase, you create deflation. So all these people say, Bitcoin is better because it's a finite number. Very nice. Okay. However, then don't expect, if that's your money supply, don't expect to get a raise. Don't expect your house to rise in value, because if the money supply cannot expand, then basically the money supply will always rise in value. That is what happened in the Great Depression. Europe defaulted, people running to the dollar. As the dollar rose, assets declined. These are just fundamental things.
Well, and so here's the other question that I pose to people, and I get answers. I don't really understand the answers, but I do get responses. So to your point, there's a finite number of Bitcoin. So as time passes on, say you hold some, I hold some. Let's say, God forbid, you die and you've lost your username and password to the blockchain, so nobody can get access to it. Okay, so then what happens to that Bitcoin? People will lose their logins over time. So what happens to that Bitcoin? Like, it just washes away? How does ownership transfer to somebody else? Or
it's a novelty. It's not a store of wealth. Nothing is a store of wealth, because everything fluctuates. Gold goes up, goes down. All right. So their idea of a store of wealth is always worth something, relative to what? When everything is fluctuating. So you have a lot of people that put out, I would say, false ideas that simply don't work or impossible. When the Federal Reserve was first created, right, it had the ability to create money elastically. Yes. Why was that necessary? Mainly because they were they were mimicking J.P. Morgan, 1907 panic. You had the '06 California earthquake. So the money moved from the insurance companies were on the East Coast, moved to the West. So there was a shortage of cash on the East Coast. Some banks then got in trouble. And JP Morgan got the other bankers together and says, if we don't bail out these banks, they're going to fall and it's going to turn into a contagion, come after us. And so he saved the day. He understood what I'm talking about. So when the Fed was created, it was done on that model. But the Fed bought corporate paper, not government. So that's where the term lender of last resort came from. So if you got into a tight situation, banks weren't willing to lend money. So a corporation could issue 90-day paper and the Fed would buy it. That way they didn't have to lay off people. Okay, it was to smooth out the economy. World War I comes, and here's our problem. Congress then says, oh, gee, we're going to have to issue a lot of debt for war, and instructs the Fed to buy their debt, not private. They never put it back. All right. Then FDR comes. And to get his socialist agenda through, he usurps the Federal Reserve and sticks it in Washington. Why? Because if you go to like newspaper.com or something like that, look up a newspaper in the 1920s, and you'll see we have 13 branches because they understood there were regional capital flows like 1906. All right. So if there was a shortage of money in one area, that central bank branch would raise rates to 4%, others at 3%, to attract money there. All right. So that was the whole purpose of having 13 branches. When FDR in 1935 usurped the Fed, one size fits all, because he was interested in his socialistic agenda. So why do we still have 13 branches now? We don't even need them. The original design is all out the window. And now, the Fed just, quantitative easing is basically just buying in government debt, rather than corporate. And this is what ends up, the big problem. People blame the central banks. That's like blaming a gun for killing somebody rather than the guy that pulled the trigger. Congress is the problem. All right. And all this talk about, gold standards, Bitcoin standards, all this stuff, very nice. Okay. It's all meaningless. Why? Because you have to change the political system first. You can't have, particularly Democrats running for office, vote for me, I'll give you, a free car, a lollipop, whatever. And you can't bribe the people for votes if you have a fixed exchange rate. All right. And you can't create the money. It's all fixed. That's what broke Bretton Woods, because the Fed wasn't creating the money. It was the government basically issuing more and more debt for Korean War, then Vietnam War. And it's the debt that is money that pays interest. In the 60s, if you had an E-bond and you went to the bank, here's a $100 E-bond, would you give me $50 on it? It was illegal to borrow against government debt. Okay, that's where, if we borrow, it's less inflationary than we print, because you're, in theory, taking money out of the system. But once you were able to buy the debt and then use it as collateral, You want to trade gold futures, you post T-bills. No problem. So all that changed. And so now the biggest supply of money is not the Federal Reserve, it's the national debt. And then let's say China bought 100% of our debt. All right. Then the $1 trillion in interest expenditures will all go to China. It doesn't even stimulate the domestic economy anymore. So all the theories that economics and you were taught in school, it's all out the window. None of it works anymore. I mean, that's why we deal with a lot of central banks. They're trapped. Keynesian economics is dead. In the 1930s, it made sense. U.S. had a balanced budget. Oh, we raise interest rates, lower interest rates. We're affecting the people directly. All right, but now the government's the biggest borrower in the room. The Fed raises interest rates to try and stop inflation. It creates more. The interest expenditures go up. We're totally screwed. I mean, there's just I
was waiting for you to say that, Martin.
I mean, you have to if we don't understand these problems, then you can't reform it. We first have to identify what the problem is. Not, oh, gee, Bitcoin, oh, the Fed creates. Come on, let's get off of this nonsense and look at really what has to be done.
What has to be done, Martin? I mean, I know you say reform, but what really has to be done?
Well, you can look on YouTube. I did it's called The Solution. It's on there. How I would basically solve the problem of the government. I'd have to treat it the same way as I would bail out a company, a debt to equity swap. And then you eliminate the government's ability to ever borrow again, period. And once you do that, then you're into the area of reforming the politics. Back in the 90s, I was called in. I dealt with, Dick Armey and Bill Archer and all that. I was asked to redesign Social Security to turn it into a wealth fund. I did, laid it out. This, we take somebody's track record. Democrats wouldn't vote for it. Why? Because they said, gee, if we get back in power, we want to change the fund managers. I said, I don't care if the person even voted. That's not on the questionnaire. What's your track record? I don't care, if you're, male, female, black, white, Indian, whatever, who you voted for. Oh, that's nonsense. What's your track record? How did you perform? Period. I mean, you start getting into all that other kind of political nonsense. That's why Social Security. I mean, when I was doing this, you're talking about the Dow was a few thousand. I mean, Social Security would not have had a problem. But look, we deal with a couple of the largest wealth funds in the world. I mean, I know how they work. I mean, simple as that.
This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McIlvaney Financial Group, with Vaulted, I literally just tap a button and I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. Vaulted is offering all of my listeners $50 of free gold when you click on my sign-up link. They have a tool called Vault Plan that allows you to passively add your gold position every month. Just activate it for 6 months and you will get $50 of free gold in your account. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike. Yeah, the challenge I would think with all this is no one's willing to do any of this reform because they don't want the party to stop.
Right. You're seeing this developing politically. It just takes time. All right. The Democratic Party's basically in a civil war at this stage.
With each other?
You got Yeah, with each other. I mean, they're you have our computer. I stood up at our conference in last November. I said the computer says the Democratic Party is going to split. Everybody said, really? And now you even have Cargill coming out telling AOC and the rest of get out, form your own party. you know, um, it's they're a mess. There's some that they just refuse to accept their woke agenda is wrong. You know, I don't care what if somebody wants to be transgender, what that's on you. Don't tell me I now can't call my mother a mother. She's a birthing machine or something. I mean, there are plenty of transgenders in Thailand where we had an office. All right. They call themselves lady boys. They don't go around and say, you have to call me a woman, and yet, Biden put Jackson, up in the Supreme Court. And she's a female. And somebody asked her the question, what is the definition of a woman? Well, I'm not really qualified to answer that. What? I mean, this is this crazy stuff. It's driving Europe crazy everywhere. It's splitting things apart. It's if I called you miss, that's offensive. So basically the solution is, hey, you. That's it. Everybody's hey, you. I don't know what your pronouns are, whatever it's going to be,
Yeah, and it's gotten to a point now, even though some of that's gone away, the damage is, in my view, has already been done because people are afraid they're going to offend somebody by saying the wrong thing, and it makes people pause before they speak. And I was like, wow, they really accomplished something by this.
The state of Maine outlawed the terms father and mother because maybe somebody that doesn't have one, would it be offensive to them? Really? I mean, to me, it was kind of like Stalin. He said, your parents are not your real parents. The state is your parent, and that's what California was going on. It's child abuse if you tell your child not to get not to get a sex change. That's child abuse, and we can take the child away from you.
I had a friend of mine whose son just didn't go back to college because his school in Ohio, they're still doing the they, them pronouns. And one of the professors gave them a week off when Trump got reelected to heal. That's what they're teaching at a state university.
Yeah. It really is appalling. It's what I encountered in Washington. I mean, if you can't, just come to agreeing on facts, it's pointless. I worked on the tax reform. Bill Archer was for a retail sales tax. Dick Armey was for the flat tax. And there were two Republicans and both from Texas. And I could not get the three of us to sit down to dinner. One at a time. I said, why can't the three of us sit down? Oh, because then they're going to think maybe we're compromising. I was finally in Dick's office, and he had his cowboy boots up on the, on the desk and smoking his cigar. And he says, Marty, cycles. I said, yeah. He says, I can't agree with Bill because we'll never get the 16th Amendment repealed. And then when the Democrats come back in, and when they'll come back in, we'll have both. And I looked at him, I said, Dick, you're absolutely right. And I just gave up. It was a waste of time. Look, I was young. I thought I could make a difference, and you realize you can't. It's just hopeless.
Because of what we talked about earlier in regards to the debt and the fact that Washington is not in, I think we're both in agreement, they're not willing to reform anything because they don't want this party to end. Does this kind of shed light on what's going on with Russia, and it appears like an escalation. Do they need a war to? Because it always seems like the solution to this is war.
The big problem. um, I totally disagree with Trump. Oh, Putin's crazy, whatever. I'm sorry. I don't know who's feeding you information, but you're on the wrong planet. Um, you know, if I was Putin, there's no way I would agree to a peace deal. You have Europe arming to the teeth. Merz out of Germany, has given Ukraine authority to use NATO missiles to attack inside Russia. You have heads of state even admitting that they're in a proxy war using Ukraine against Russia. You had the former PM of Estonia. Now she's like in the EU government. And she actually came out and said, oh, Russia's too big and needs to be broken up. If I'm Putin, I'm listening to all this stuff. I'm going to agree to a peace deal. They know they are coming after them. We had staff in Germany and people up to 60 years old have been told to report for duty. 60. Poland has ordered all males to attend military training. I had a friend which just went to the Vienna Peace Conference. And he left. He says, this has got nothing to do with peace anymore. Everybody's talking about increasing drafting and preparing for war. And that was the Vienna Peace Conference. They want war. And look, the problem is, as you say, reform. When the EU was being created, they came to me. I sat down, said, this is how we created currency, etc. And all the promises that, everybody pay the same interest rate is all based upon the United States. All right. And they're only comparing the federal government. But Helmut Kohl refused to allow the German people to vote on joining the euro because he even admitted that he would have lost 7-3. So he takes Germany into the euro without a public vote and insists that, the Germans would be upset and they wouldn't want to join because you're consolidating the debts. It'd be like a bailout for Greece or something. So he said no consolidation of the debt. I warned them in 1998, and I'm the guy that was there. All right. I said, this is going to blow up in your face. I was told point blank, we just have to get the euro in to create their little bureaucracy. We'll worry about the debts later. Here we are 26 years later. They still haven't addressed the debt issue. Now, here's the problem. You can look back at 2010 when Greece got into trouble. What happens? It turns into this contagion. The traders made a shitload of money, short in Greece. Oh, who's next? Spain. All right, France, Italy, they're all in trouble. All right. You get one EU government at this stage that ends up unable to meet loan requirements, etc. It's going to turn into another contagion. They know this. All right. They have no intention of paying off debt, neither is U.S. or any government. All right. All these people, these dollarization and U.S. dollars. Really? They have no clue about the world. Zero. These people. If you look at total global consumer spending, U.S. is 25%. How much is Europe? Out of $10, $1.29. That's it. All right. highly socialistic, highly taxed. Um, their economic growth is a tiny fraction of the United States. All right. They have to sell their BMWs to the United States. Japan has to sell Toyotas. That has to be priced in dollars. All right. Not euros and yen. China has looked at these models. We have offices there. I know what they do. They have looked at the European model and the American model. All right. We are a consumer based economy. All right. They're dictatorial. They still operate under the old mercantile models of the 19th century. We just make stuff, bring the money back. But they're so afraid of inflation. They keep regulations high, taxes high, etc. The average net worth of a German, you can look it up, is below that of an Italian. All right. Yet Germany is the strongest economy in Europe, 25% of GDP, but they're not the richest. All right. And take the New York Stock Exchange. The capitalization of New York by itself, all right, is more than all of the European stock markets combined. I mean, to give you an idea, the U.S., take New York and NASDAQ together, it's about $45 trillion. All right. What is Europe? Maybe 20. You know, oh, you're going to sell U.S. assets and where are you going to put it? All right. I was an international hedge fund manager. First, you consider currency risk. All right. But then you have country risk. What are they doing with laws? You know, are they likely to shift things, put in capital controls? All right. Then how deep is the market? I can pick up the phone and say, buy me $10 billion worth of U.S. treasuries. Europe, I can't. I still got to make the same decision. Gee, do I want Germany? Do I want France? Do I want Italy? There's no consolidated debt. This is why the euro's never been able to attract us. You look at Japan, and everybody goes, oh, well, they're mostly self-funded. Yes, true. Most of their debt is held domestically, unlike the United States. However, then you look at the stats. Japan was also one of the largest holders of U.S. debt, not the government, private corporations. Why? Because that's a hedge against their own government. All right. You know, you have to sometimes pick up the rug and look a little bit closer at this stuff. Europe is a basket case. They need war. And look, I've shown around the world for years, how do countries default? When you're in these Ponzi schemes and you're just issuing new debt to pay off the old, that can keep going. All right, no problem. All right. As long as you have somebody standing in line to buy the new tranche. When that stops, and you can't sell the new debt to pay off the old, that's when the default comes. That's where we are with Europe. All right. And the problem is they never consolidated the debt. So just one gets in trouble, it's going to affect all of them. And this is why they need war. All the talk shows are talking war, war, war.
Did you see Drudge? Not that I look at Drudge all the time, but yesterday they had it was like brink of World War III. Europe is Putin readying 50,000 troops. Europe prepared to launch, deep into Russia. I mean, all of these headlines, stirring it all up. And I mean, did you think, or what were your expectations when? Remember, Trump was saying 24 hours I could end this. I could broker a peace deal, and I feel like he's tried. But does he not understand the position that Russia's winning?
He could have done that provided Europe was not stabbing America in the back. All right. It's, look, we even had 2 employees in Ukraine. All right. I had information which I passed on when you had Zelensky meeting at the White House. First of all, that was supposed to be a signing in ceremony in Kiev, not Washington. Boris Johnson hopped on the plane and was in Kiev 3 days before. I had inside information about that. He instructed Zelensky to insist on going to the White House, and they thought that they could embarrass Trump into keeping the funding going. I warned them what information I had. So when Zelensky got to the White House, they were prepared. It turned into a confrontation. Zelensky takes his orders from Paris, London, and NATO, not the United States. And I talked to the military there, and they said basically if he was on fire, they wouldn't urinate on him until he was dead. They were told to go to the border. They were never instructed that they were going to invade Russia. That order came from MI6 out of London. All right. They told them, you now invade Russia. Putin has laid down numerous red lines, and they have deliberately crossed each one, desperately trying to get him to attack NATO. All right. Zelensky even fired a missile into Poland and said, oh, that was Russia. Well, the serial number showed it was Ukrainian. They've tried to create so many false flags. And, Putin basically before said, well, if you give missiles to Ukraine to attack inside Russia, that's our red line. And they didn't do anything. He keeps putting these red lines down. He now understands. And that's why if I'm him, there's no way I'm agreeing to a peace deal. They have crossed every red line he has put down. And because they want war. They're just trying to get him to attack anything in NATO so that they can say he's the aggressor. I have been talking to people on Capitol Hill. And I will say, to my surprise, I said, look, Europe is going to create a false flag. They're going to say Russia attacked. They're going to try and invoke Article 5 and drag the United States in under NATO. I said, we have to get out. I thought that was a pretty straightforward, analysis from my sources. I was shocked, and somebody very close to Trump at least said to me, you're right. I agree. I was shocked to hear that, actually. Trump has been pulling some troops now out of Europe. We got to get the hell out of NATO. They want war, and there's no way that Trump can create peace. Forget it. Done. All right. No matter what he does, Europe is there stabbing him in the back. They just want war.
But couldn't the United States just cut off the military aid that they're giving to Ukraine? Because they're getting it mostly from here, right?
No, Europe is now giving in some. Merz just said he can use NATO missiles now to attack inside Russia. I'm afraid that Trump, some of the people in his inner circle are still neocons. I think he's getting the wrong information. And I am very concerned that, his statements like, oh, Putin's crazy, but no, he's not. I'm sorry. You better step back and take a look at what the hell's going on, because you're being stabbed in the back. It's Europe. And unless you deal with Europe, I don't see any shot in hell of a peace deal. And if I was Russia, forget it. You've got K-list. I mean, right there in the EU government saying Russia's too big and it's got to be broken up. You know, I mean, what if Putin came and said that about Europe or the United States? They'd be freaking out. But we can say that about Russia. You know, they just want war. As simple as that. And this is why Hungary understands it's breaking with them. Serbia. Why did the UN bomb in Kosovo? Because the Serbs were pro-Russian. Croats were not. So they bombed Serbia because they were pro-Russian. All right. What's the solution for Ukraine? It's very simple. It's the same way as Yugoslavia broke up and Czechoslovakia. The Czech Republic and Slovakia is split according to ethnic lines. That was the solution. Why is that solution not being presented in Russia? I mean, in Ukraine. The Donbass, the Minsk agreement was supposed to allow them to separate and vote. All right. Crimea. There's no Ukrainians there. 15% of the population are Mongols. The rest are Russians. They've been there for hundreds of years. All right. It's that region should be separated, allowed to separate, and that's it, the same way as Yugoslavia or Czechoslovakia. Then there's no war. They want war. You know, NATO is basically instigating this over there. And if they were honest, then apply the same strategy as in Yugoslavia. They split, that's it. But this, because the Russians, no, they can't split. I mean, I don't see a solution here. I really don't. And I think we will end up in war. And I'm afraid that Trump is being misled. I know he is genuinely against war. As I said, I had dinner at Mar-a-Lago back in March of 2020. And he said he wanted to pull the troops out of Afghanistan. And he said he was tired of writing letters to their families that your son died for God and country. And he said, what are we doing there? What difference are we going to make? They've been fighting over borders for 1,000 years. And it was the first head of state that I ever heard talking about the people that actually die on the battlefield. Everybody else, it's just a football game and their collateral damage. So I know where Trump's heart was, but now I'm very concerned with his recent statements. And I think he's being manipulated. And I am very concerned that we end up in war. That's why I've been telling in Congress, get the hell out of NATO ASAP, because they're going to drag us in.
What would a war look like to you in 2025, 2026?
I'm more concerned about 27, but I think, look, this is the third time they're trying to conquer Russia. You had Napoleon, then you had Hitler. Why? Russia is the richest country in the world from a natural resource perspective. All this absolute bullshit that, Russia wants to take Europe. Why? They have nothing. All right. There's no natural resources. They have no energy, no gold. All you're going to do is walk into France and they're going to say, are you going to pay our pensions now? I mean, forget.
It's like broken cars, right, Martin? I mean, Europe's like a bunch of...
Exactly. Look, Japan invaded Manchuria. Why? Because they had the resources. Japan had no energy, same as Europe. They were getting all their energy from the United States. That's why there was a conquest for profit. There's no profit by Russia going into Europe. They're comparing it to the days of Khrushchev. All right, Khrushchev saying, we will bury you. It had nothing to do with economics. That was an economic religion, that communism would defeat capitalism. That's what it was all about. That was it. It wasn't like we'll be better off if we wipe these people out. They thought they were on the right side, and they were wrong. Simple as that. But so countries invade others when there's a profit. All right, just look at Alexander the Great. All right, went after Persia. They had the biggest, treasury of anybody in the ancient world. Continued, took Egypt, a lot of money, tons of gold. There was a profit to be, you split the spoils. The troops were part of, what do I get out of it? Why should I go risk my life for nothing? All right. They divided the spoils among the troops. What do you get now? The best a soldier's going to possibly hope is to come home in one piece. That's it. He doesn't get anything out of it. War has changed. So I don't see Putin agreeing to any peace deal. If I was him, I would not. When Europe does not want peace, they want confrontation. And so, yes, he's got to build up more troops. He knows what's coming. Simple as that. This is not a war with Ukraine. This is a war with NATO.
And your concern is that Trump is in the United States. It's inevitable they're going to get dragged into this.
Probably yes. I'm doing my best to try and keep us the hell out, but I wouldn't count on me being successful.
With that, so you think it's 27 is when this will escalate. So what do you think will occur between now and then? Because we're not even halfway through 25.
I think it's going to continue to get worse here in 25 into 26. When does it really blossom into World War? Probably around late 26 to 27. Look, it's the problem that you have is going after Russia. China has already hinted that they will join Russia. So will North Korea. All right. So this is a war with NATO. They understand that. You know, if you allow them to take out Russia, China's next. So, China will come to the aid of Russia against Europe. I won't go back to Europe anymore. I mean, that's it. I'm done.
Do you then? So if we're going to see just slow deterioration over the next 12 to 18 months, give or take, what do you see then on the economic front in America? Because if Europe is basically toast, and I think I've heard you talk about it before, not only with me but on other interviews, where that money, the big money in Europe, will it come back to the United States, or will it be reinvested here?
Yeah. We had a lot of institutional clients in Europe. And like I say, war is being talked on, even on talk shows. And so, they know they can feel it in the air. So they've been moving their gold from London and Switzerland to New York. Others are moving some gold off to Singapore. I'm not so sure that Singapore is going to be scot-free, because you're likely to see, by 27, you're more into the international war level. And look, our computer shows Europe is not going to win. This is it. The third time is not going to be a charm. Their economic models are absolutely appalling. Look at, there's only two economies that are actually shrinking. I'm not talking about recession. I'm saying shrinking in size. That is Japan and Russia and Germany. Basically what you have is Europe. They put in the COVID, absolutely crazy restrictions. That shut down a lot of small businesses. Then you put in the climate change. I was in Berlin, and I then had a meeting. I had to go to Rome. I couldn't even get a direct flight. I had to hire a private jet to make the meeting on time. Since COVID, a lot of your international flights have been scrapped, and things have got really bad in traveling airwise. And then you put in the sanctions against Russia. That's pretty much like saying, okay, fine, see this gun, I'm going to shoot myself in the foot to show you I'm serious. You're the one importing the energy. So what have they done? They're now having to import it from the United States at a cost of like 3 times. The German economy is shrinking, and that is the core of the EU. They have so screwed themselves. I can't even emphasize how bad. Then you put in, all the migrants, which were Islam. And you're creating all kinds of civil unrest over there. There were 1,000 girls in Germany that were raped on New Year's Eve a couple years back. What did Merkel do? Oh, we have to hide that. So she told the police, don't use the word rape, call it assault. Look, you get different cultures. This is, Bismarck, Otto Bismarck, in 1888, he came out and he said, Europe is going to go into a major war. It's going to engulf the whole continent, and it's going to come from the Balkans. Absolutely. 1914. All right. Why? If you've ever been to that region, and this is the mess of the whole area, it was once part of the Ottoman Empire. So you have a lot of Islamic there. Then you have Orthodox Christianity from Russia, that side. Then you have Catholicism from the west side. You got 3 languages, 3 religions, different ethnic groups. This is why nobody gets along. Just look at Ireland. It's split between the Protestants and the Catholics. I've been in Bavaria. I've said plenty of times, they were going to have a holiday. I said, what's the holiday? Oh, we won the war. I said, which war is this? Oh, against Prussia, the Protestants, because Bavaria is Catholic. These things live on. And we handed a handful of jets to Greece publicly. You can Google it. What did they actually say? Oh, now we can stage a surprise attack on Turkey, another NATO country. All right. But, the hatred between Greece and Turkey, it goes back to Alexander the Great. You can't solve these things.
It's never going to change.
No, it's not. I did watch a documentary on FDR, and he couldn't get us into World War II. It took Pearl Harbor to do that. But he was up in Boston trying to get support to join, the European war. And that's mostly Irish. And so what did they say? You really expect us to send our boys over there to defend the Brits after what they did to the Irish? I mean, that's why America was always isolationist. The people that came here was like, we wanted to get away from all that shit, It took Pearl Harbor to get us into that.
What do you see then coming back to America, economically for the rest of 25 and then, into 26? I'm had people on here talking about student loan debt, buy now, pay later, real estate. It doesn't appear the Fed is dropping rates. What's going on with the bond market, both here and Japan. It's like a lot. It's like there's a lot going on, but yet nothing's happening. And with that, what do you see? What is the computer telling you?
Well, we're in an economic contraction into 2028 globally. Japan is probably the first to fall, unless Europe goes into war first. But Japan's in a major debt crisis. Yes, most of their debt is held domestically, fine. So you don't have necessarily foreigners, withdrawing their money from there for that reason. But again, they're in the same situation. They can keep the can going down the road as long as somebody else is in line to buy the next tranche. And as you're going into an economic contraction, because the Japanese economy is also shrinking, them and Germany, they're the two, right? Shrinking. So not recession. It's getting smaller. As that happens, you can't sell the debt domestically. All right. More and more companies are withdrawing. Clients we have there, they're looking at basically they have been buying more treasuries. It's a liquid market. And they do feel that interest rates practically are going to rise. You have more debt coming. You have war coming. Interest rates do not decline in war. Simple as that. They go up. And so the more you have the war drums beating in Europe, do not expect the Fed to be dropping rates. The Fed is concerned, but you have to understand, capital flows at this stage in the game. And most of your domestic analysis and economists don't look at the globe collectively. Let's say you own a building. You sell it to me for 10 million, whatever. Nothing really changes domestically between us. However, let's say I'm from Britain and I buy your building for 10 million. I now have to bring cash into the system to buy it. I'm increasing your money supply. This is not, Fed. This is not my. You have to understand international capital flow alters the domestic money supply. Simple as that. All right. This was Milton Friedman's criticism of the Federal Reserve during the Great Depression. All the money was coming here. The Fed was afraid to monetize because because you had the 1931 sovereign defaults and all the money's coming here. And the Fed was concerned that if they increased the money supply here, the dollar would also decline. So they refused to monetize a lot of the money that was coming in. And that's one of the criticisms of Milton Friedman of the Fed, that they didn't, all the gold was coming here, but they weren't allowing it to be monetized. So they created deflation because they were concerned about the value of the dollar. So, I mean, you have to look at these things globally, not just simply domestically.
The in regards to the tariffs, Trump has just given the EU an extension. What are your thoughts on what he's done since he's taken office overall?
Look, he is using the tariffs as a negotiating tool. All right. A 10% tariff is a tariff, 50%, 200%. This is political. That's to force negotiation. All right. That's not realistic. And that's why he put a 50% on Europe. Europe is the worst. And people don't understand. Europe was looking at it. All right, you saw the stuff that they did to the farmers. Oh, you can't grow it, nitrogen or whatever. They put quality controls on imports. Forget tariffs. Oh, any crop that is grown with a fertilizer which we have outlawed here cannot come into our country. So they then try to force farmers in the United States to comply with their rules. All right. So it's more than just tariffs. In Canada, a lot of Canadians basically said we should thank Trump. You won't read that in the papers. Why? Because they didn't even know that each province acts as its own independent country and puts tariffs on the other ones. If you're a lawyer in Nova Scotia, you can't practice in Newfoundland. In the United States, if you're a lawyer and you're qualified in a federal court, you practice anywhere in the country. They can't do that, and you can't do it in Europe. You can't do it in Canada. This is all this Marxist agenda. We have to protect labor. Well, when you protect labor with high tariffs, etc., and some agricultural products in Quebec have a 250% tariff from Americans to go in. They don't want it in there to protect their farmers, so they get higher prices. This is against the consumer. So yes, Trump is correct, and what he's trying to do is create free trade. All right. A lot of people were shocked. Israel said, all right, fine, we'll drop our tariffs. And everybody's like, you got tariffs on American goods after everything we do for you to begin with? A lot of people weren't aware of all this stuff. But like I say, it's not just tariffs. Europe is the worst. So they have all sorts of different regulations, one way or another. The French, they were demanding that you can't call anything champagne unless it comes from France. Stuff like that. Yet, Corbel and the champagnes out of California were grown there because the people that came were from France, and they brought the same grapes with them and planted them over there. And the French don't like that. So you have to look at things from really from a global perspective. But my main concern with Trump is on the war front, and I'm concerned that he is being misled at this point. And if he's going to put more sanctions on Russia, etc. Look, I mean, it's the wrong direction.
I know.
Rome lasted for 1,000 years. How? All right. There were no tariffs. All right. It was free trade. So if you made a vase in France, you could just sell it to somebody in Syria. That's what keeps war at bay. If we had free trade between Europe, Russia, and America, then the Russian people are going to be benefiting, and they're going to put a check against their own politicians. Hey, what are you talking about? We don't want a war with them. You're going to put me out of business. You saw it in the American Civil War. You know, Lincoln came out and said, to make it worse, any northern company that owed money to the South, you couldn't pay them. It was illegal. So, I mean, this, you know, the answer is free trade. Free trade creates less war. When you put sanctions on, you're punishing people, then, hey, I got nothing else to restrain me.
Last question. For regular people like myself that listen to this, the times are going to get tough. No?
Mm-hmm.
Tougher than where we're at now?
Yes. As you know, I've been dealing with governments for close to 50 years. I don't see any difference between them. There are no mirrors in government. They never look at themselves as a problem. They always see us as the problem. And they only act out of their own self-interest. They don't give two shits about you. It's them retaining power, period. And that's the deep state. I supported Trump trying to take down the deep state, but I'm concerned that the deep state at the end of the day is going to win.
Where can people find you, Martin?
ArmstrongEconomics.com. It's a completely open site. We don't sell advertising. You don't have to put your email in. We don't send out 50 emails, you know, saying you want to buy swampland in Florida or something, you know. We're not blocked in China. We're not even blocked in Russia. We basically try to be neutral on everything. And somebody in Washington said that they were surprised we're the only ones that are not blocked globally. We try to, keep it, legitimate, whatever. I mean, I even appear on Russian TV. They know I'm not, I think that's important to at least show that, look, this is the real story. Not every American just hates Russians, period. Yes, we got assholes, just like you got assholes. They got their neocons, we got ours. So does China. But no matter what country you go to, there's always dissent between one side and the other.
Martin, as always, I appreciate you coming on, and look forward to more conversations ahead. And we'll see where things are at with you next time we talk.
Well, we live in interesting times, right? The Chinese curse.
Mic drop.